There are many reasons why people uproot their entire lives to move to a whole new location. They are leaving stories that are untold in their old homes and cities. But there must be a story as to why they have left their homes to move to a new city. Rochester, New York, a place where people from the South and from other parts of the world can experience a true sense of growth and home. But why would they uproot themselves and move to Rochester? Let's take a closer look at their stories.
I grew up in North Carolina, a town called Mooresville, North Carolina. Segregated, of course, in the schools and in the stores. And I could tell you a funny one because I was the outspoken kid out of 3 children. We went in the store to buy some dresses with my mother, and the lady kept going behind and walking behind us to see if we're going to steal anything, walking behind us to see if we're going to steal anything. And she said, "Oh, I want to bring you a dress." I found I said, "I wouldn't wear this rag to the store." And I was just a young girl, and my mother was whispering, Willie, be quiet. Don't talk like that, Willie, be quiet." So that's one. We got a lot of things like that when we were growing up.
Actually, it was very good. My mother sheltered me a lot. My grandfather was an AME minister, and he would come and get me, and I would go spend the summers in a place called Micanopy, Florida. Very small rural town, and he took a lot of good care of me. Like I said, my father had passed me at an early age. So I really had a very good home life.
I say that growing up in Waynesboro, I was the last of the generations that lived on an all-black street growing up, and so the entire street was family. Waynesboro has a population of around, when I was born, 9,000 people, 300 black families, and so through the years, most of us are related, but that was an area where we were segregated too, was that particular section of the town, so the street was my whole family. Interestingly, now, the same street now only has, I think, 3 black families on the street where I grew up that was all black.
Well, happy memories, because I had a brother who was younger. When we were younger, we had beautiful large oak trees in our backyard, and whatever he did, I did. I would climb the trees too, which I'd get a spanking about getting in the trees with my brother. But I think I had a pretty nice life growing up, pretty good.
So I was relocated to Rochester by my vocation. So I was sent to Rochester. I'm a pastor by calling, and in our structure of government, we have a centralized form of government where the bishop sends pastors. And so after college, I was sent to Schenectady. From Schenectady, I was sent to Rochester.
Well, I left St. Petersburg because I thought I knew everything, and I wanted to be grown, and I didn't want anybody to tell me nothing. So I left St. Petersburg when I was 18 to come to Rochester, because I wanted to be independent. I didn't want anybody to tell me nothing.
So I left Waynesboro to go to college. So I left Waynesboro to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And while Waynesboro and Howard really aren't that far apart in travel distance, only about an hour and a half apart, but because I'm from a small town, Howard had more students than my entire hometown. And so while it seems close, it was worlds apart. I remember when I was leaving for school, my whole family, the whole street, gathered on the street, had me in the middle of the circle to pray over me because I was going to this big city. And so to go to DC caused me to, I had to shed a whole lot of fears. Had to adjust to very different culture, had to learn that everyone is not the same, had to come to appreciate differences and understand, in the words of Dr. Wright, that different does not mean deficient. To be able to see the beauty of God in everyone that I encounter. So I left behind in Waynesboro a lot of fear. I left behind a lot of preconceived notions. I left behind, I don't even think I had a full appreciation for my own culture. And I gained that whenever I got to DC and was immersed in Black culture. And so I left behind a lot in that manner. And don't get me wrong, I was blessed. I had a good childhood, right? Had a good childhood. I had a wonderful family. Even after my mother died, I had people who filled in the gaps. I had a wonderful church that made sure I did not miss any of the pieces. And when I got to DC, I found another community that kept me, sustained me. I was telling somebody even yesterday when I got out of you go through school, I was staying in the dorms. When we got my first apartment, I got my first apartment from someone at the church, and it was housed by saints at the church. They're the ones who bought me my bedroom furniture and all that kind of stuff. And so one thing that I've never left behind, been able to find wherever I go, is community. Because I think life's too hard to do independently, to do on one's own. You need community. You need people to walk with you on the journey.
Was moving to Rochester worth it?
Yes. Well, I was married and at home waiting for my husband to send for me. And he came and he got a job at the U of R. And he sent for me to come. That's how I got here. Yes.
I moved here, got a good job at the post office. I stayed for 43 years. And I had my son, and I also raised my nephew. And my mother, when she got to the point where she needed help, she came up and took care of her until she passed.
Yeah, of course it was worth it. If you go where God tells you to go, it's always worth it. I mean, and sometimes you might not know what you're getting into. It might be an unknown land. It might be different than what you've experienced. But if you're following God, it's going to be worth it. You're going to learn something that you can utilize for the journey. You're going to find something that's going to help you in this next echelon. So always following God is always worth it.
The church it's always been a foundation in my life, even as a child. I can remember 5 and 6 years old going to church, and I kept that going and I got up here for a while, and of course I did other things other than going to church, but I got back in the church and I came to Baber through around different circumstances. I was a Baptist, but through circumstances I ended up at Baber, and the Baber family adopted me, and I've loved Baber and the family ever since. They've always been foremost in my, God being foremost in my life, but Baber has been very close to me.
So, there's a lot of things that I do differently here. I think one of the things that I was blessed with at Baber that's a tad bit different than other churches is that we have a nonprofit arm. So 501c3, a nonprofit that's a subsidiary of the church called Rise Up Rochester Incorporated that works to empower the community to establish and maintain a nonviolent culture and provide support to crime victims and their families. So Rise Up Rochester provides wraparound services to persons who have experienced violence, whether that might be temporary relocation, whether that's clothing, shelter, whether that is we need to provide you support in any way, shape, or form. We have support groups for families of homicide victims that meet multiple times in a month. We also have a hospital response, so if you experience blunt force trauma in and you are at Strong Hospital, we're able to provide you, we provide immediate kind of wraparound services to individuals in that manner. We also provide a Christmas party for children of homicide victims. We do a celebration of remembrance. We do safe summers where we encourage people that it doesn't have to end this way, especially since 60% of homicides come from a dispute. He said, she said, a back and forth. And that is working in that space is not something that I necessarily did before I came or coming from Schenectady. It's interesting to work in that space, however. My middle name, Clifton, I'm actually named after my cousin that was murdered right before I was born. And even since I've been the pastor here, my second godchild, second or third godchild, he was actually murdered since I pastored here. And so it's not something that one's immune from life, but working closely with families who have experienced violence, trauma of that nature, I think is something that's a tad bit different that's doing here. I think it's Jesus is often found near people who are experiencing pain. So I think that's the appropriate place to be with people who have experienced pain and trauma. And especially, one of my, every time I turn on the news, right, it's bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news, wars, rumors of wars, homicide, killing, robberies, murders. It's always bad news. But what I love about what I'm able to do is I'm able to proclaim good news. And so to persons who have experienced trauma, persons who have been made to feel that this world's not safe, persons who have watched a homicide, heard the cries of mothers that have seen the blood spilled on the streets, who now live with this trauma in their bodies, trauma in their mind. I'm able to proclaim good news. I'm able to proclaim that there is hope, that while this hurt, this loss will be ever so present, that as you continue to walk on, that somehow you will become whole again, that you're not walking through this process alone, that you're not by yourself, that there is light at the end of this tunnel. I'm able to proclaim good news in the midst of darkness, and I think that's one area that I'm able, that's different, that I'm able to walk in this particular season in being in Rochester.